poised and dignified black woman stepped gently into the corporate boardroom. A group of middle-aged white male executives sat waiting, their eyes fixed on her with curious, judgmental gazes. But everyone's attention instantly shifted to the man at the head of the table, Leonard Harrison, Terra Nova's famously powerful and arrogant CEO. Olivia had spent nearly a decade in rooms just like this, where every look carried a clear message. She didn't belong. Yet, with the remarkable calm of someone who'd weathered countless underestimations, she approached Harrison directly and with absolute confidence. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrison," Olivia said, her voice both soft and commanding, radiating unshakable assurance. She extended her hand in the customary diplomatic gesture. Leonard Harrison looked down at the offered hand with cool indifference, a mocking smirk twitching at his lips. Without a moment's hesitation, he folded his arms, leaned back, and replied coldly, "I don't shake hands with subordinates." A sudden hush fell over the room, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees. A few of the executives furrowed their brows, but quickly masked their reactions, while others openly grinned in approval, dripping with disdain. Olivia did not flinch. She withdrew her hand smoothly, her expression unchanging. Her deep, steady gaze never wavered from Leonard's. Not angry, not flustered, but composed and self-possessed, as though this were far from her first encounter with such arrogance. "I'm not your subordinate, Mr. Harrison," she replied softly, her tone even but charged with authority. Harrison laughed aloud, turning to the board for support. "Oh? Then what role do you claim here at our company?" he sneered. The men around him chuckled, their laughter laced with ridicule. Still, Olivia remained unshaken. She quietly opened the leather portfolio she always carried, her movements deliberate and measured. "I'm here to decide on our $4 billion investment in Terra Nova," Olivia announced, each word striking the mocking atmosphere like a hammer blow. An ominous silence swept the room. The contemptuous smile vanished from Leonard Harrison's face, replaced by wide-eyed astonishment and unmistakable doubt. The other executives exchanged bewildered glances, as if struggling to process what they'd just heard. In Harrison's mind, a frantic thought flashed. $4 billion. Impossible. How could this woman hold such power? He quickly dismissed the worry as a misunderstanding or a prank. Attempting to reclaim his trademark arrogance, he straightened up and sneered to mask his embarrassment. A $4 billion investment? Are you kidding me? No one in their right mind would grant that authority to someone like you. Again, the board erupted in uneasy laughter, though this time it sounded forced. Olivia said nothing. Her expression was now the cold detachment of a seasoned investor, calmly surveying the scene. Without another word, she closed her portfolio, leaned back comfortably, and observed Leonard and his colleagues. She knew this moment was not merely a personal slight. It was the clearest evidence of the prejudice and hubris ingrained in the company she was evaluating. Harrison, regaining a fraction of his confidence, continued with mocking bravado. "Well, then, let's begin the meeting. I'm very curious to see what you've brought us." Olivia nodded without responding, her gaze drifting to the large window overlooking the bustling city below. Inside, she made a silent resolution to reconsider the investment, but for now, she would watch a little longer. Leonard Harrison and Terra Nova Technologies had no inkling of the consequences of their arrogance. They had no idea that within hours, their careers and reputations would be challenged by the very woman they had dismissed. A quiet but brutal battle lay ahead, and Olivia Johnson would be the one firmly in control. Olivia's gaze slowly drifted away from the expansive window, where the city below bustled on as if nothing had happened. Now, an odd tension filled the boardroom, even though Leonard Harrison continued his grandiose recital of Terra Nova Technologies' achievements. Olivia gently straightened her collar, a motion so subtle it barely stirred the air, yet the clearest indication that she remained perfectly calm and in control. In truth, Olivia Johnson was no stranger to discrimination or scenes like the one she'd just endured. Beneath her unassuming exterior lay the CEO of Johnson Capital Partners, a prestigious investment firm managing over $50 billion in assets. Her position was the envy of countless finance professionals and the prize every major corporation sought. One nod or shake of her head could move markets and unsettle even the most formidable companies. Yet she had chosen to appear modest at Terra Nova, not out of fear of judgment but by design. She deliberately dressed plainly and shunned any display of wealth. No luxury car, no glittering jewelry, because Olivia believed that in moments seemingly inconsequential, an organization's true character shone brightest. Flash back 1 hour. Olivia had entered the grand lobby of Terra Nova Technologies headquarters. She'd observed everything: the decor, how staff treated clients, and above all, their attitude toward anyone they deemed unimportant. From the moment she approached the reception desk, Miranda's skeptical stare spoke volumes. The young receptionist offered a forced, perfunctory smile, sizing Olivia up head to toe, as though trying to decide if this plainly dressed black woman had wandered in by mistake. "I'm here to see Mr. Leonard Harrison," Olivia had said calmly, her confident tone commanding any professional's immediate attention. Miranda, however, barely concealed her doubt. "You're here for the administrative assistant interview, right?" she asked, as if it were inconceivable that someone like Olivia could have a direct appointment with the powerful CEO. "No," Olivia replied evenly. "I have a meeting with Mr. Harrison at 10 a.m. My name is Olivia Johnson." Reluctantly, Miranda checked her screen. "Right, you can wait in the other area," she said, pointing to a cramped corner far from the plush VIP lounge where two sharply dressed men were sipping coffee. Olivia did not protest. She nodded and took a seat in the hard-backed chair in the corner, fully aware that this slight was no accident. It was proof of a corporate culture steeped in prejudice, where people judged worth by appearance alone. For the next 45 minutes, she watched everything. Miranda's dismissive manner toward other visitors, the staff's interactions, and the unspoken hierarchy etched into every gesture. Each detail was concrete evidence of the issues lurking beneath Terra Nova's glossy facade. Famous in financial circles for her uncanny ability to read both people and organizations, Olivia always sought to understand an institution's inner workings, something no balance sheet or slick pitch deck could reveal. Now, seated in the chilly boardroom with Leonard Harrison and his team, she knew that her decision to withdraw or proceed with the $4 billion investment was no longer merely about capital. It had become a contest between real value and prejudice, between healthy corporate culture and the toxic arrogance of those who thought power meant belittling others. A faint smile curved her lips. Long prepared for this moment, Olivia knew she was not alone, and this time she would control the game entirely. Leonard Harrison and his allies would soon learn that behind her calm, unassuming facade lay a formidable power, and it would cost them dearly to discover it. From that discreet glance, Olivia had anticipated this meeting wouldn't be easy, but what she was facing far exceeded even her own expectations. After more than 45 minutes of waiting, Leonard Harrison's personal assistant, a blonde woman named Jessica, finally appeared and asked Olivia to stand. Jessica led her down a long corridor adorned with expensive artwork, stopping at a dark wooden door that looked nothing like the grand entrance to the executive boardroom. Jessica opened the door with polite but unmistakably cold courtesy. "Please come in. Mr. Harrison will be with you shortly." Olivia stepped inside. The room was cramped and Spartan, hardly what one would expect at a leading tech firm like Terra Nova. A small, dark and laminate table stood at its center, surrounded by stiff, uncomfortable chairs. There was no projector or screen, only a few thin packets of papers, carelessly scattered as though hastily prepared. Looking around, Olivia recognized immediately that this arrangement was no accident. It was a silent message about how the leadership viewed her, someone they believed existed merely to fulfill a diversity checkbox, not to play any substantive role in Terra Nova's future. Moments later, the door burst open and Leonard Harrison strode in without ceremony, eyes glued to his phone as he walked, giving Olivia no acknowledgement. Only after a beat did he look up, his cold gaze sweeping the room before he flopped into a chair with his customary arrogance. "Oh, you must be here," Leonard drawled, his tone dismissive. "Sorry to keep you waiting. We do have a bit of our diversity obligation to handle." 3 other executives in dark suits trailed in behind him, all regarding Olivia as though she were an uninvited guest. Olivia assessed each man in turn, memorizing every subtle detail. Leonard introduced her curtly and with thinly veiled sarcasm. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Olivia Johnson, here to evaluate our diversity credentials. I'm sure we'll get through this rather quickly." Olivia offered a slight smile, her composure unwavering. No one in the room realized that every word and gesture was being meticulously logged in her mind as evidence for her forthcoming decision. Once the introduction ended, Leonard launched into an overly brief overview of Terra Nova's products, as if presuming Olivia lacked the expertise to grasp anything more technical. He even glanced sideways at his colleagues, smirking with contempt. The tension in the room mounted, but Olivia remained unruffled. When Leonard finally finished his perfunctory presentation, Olivia spoke up softly but pointedly, posing incisive, expert questions. "In your most recent quarterly report, I noticed R&D spending dropped by over 15%, yet you proclaimed Terra Nova was accelerating advanced technology development. Could you explain that discrepancy?" Leonard paused a heartbeat, then forced a grin and glanced around as if seeking help. No one spoke for him. He shrugged, trying to sound confident but clearly flustered. "That's a complex financial matter. Perhaps you're not familiar with how a tech company like Terra Nova allocates expenses. We frequently reclassify costs across different categories." Olivia pressed on, calm and unwavering. "And regarding the AI platform you mentioned earlier, what model are you using to optimize inference speed and minimize latency at scale? I don't see any clear reference in your latest technical disclosure." Leonard's face flushed with embarrassment. To mask his lack of preparation, he turned to a colleague and feigned laughter, as if Olivia's question were absurd. "Well, on the deep technical side, I'm afraid that's not really on today's agenda. Perhaps our CTO can cover it later if necessary." The others in the room chuckled awkwardly, their eyes still brimming with condescension. Olivia, however, showed no sign of irritation. She knew exactly how to control the situation through her serene silence. In fact, the contempt and arrogance displayed by Leonard and Terra Nova's leadership had ceased to be mere slights. They had become irrefutable proof that Terra Nova was hiding critical shortcomings behind its polished success. Olivia thought to herself that this was precisely the opportunity she needed to assess the true value of the $4 billion investment she was considering. She closed her portfolio with deliberate calm, sat up straight, and continued to observe Leonard. Despite his dismissive tone and veiled mockery, Olivia understood that this meeting was only the opening salvo in a much longer battle. one she had planned down to the smallest detail. And for Olivia Johnson, every ounce of disrespect and every dismissive remark from Leonard Harrison and his colleagues would come at a very steep price. The tension in the boardroom persisted, a cold silence enveloping the cramped space. Olivia sat motionless, her calm, incisive gaze following every subtle movement of Leonard Harrison and the other executives around the table. She understood perfectly what was happening. Leonard had realized that the woman opposite him could not be easily cowed, and that realization made him visibly uncomfortable. Leonard began to lose his patience. His face flushed, a carefully concealed anger flickering behind his forced smile. He leaned back, cast a furtive glance at his colleagues as if seeking an ally, then turned his gaze back to Olivia. His polite facade evaporated. Suddenly, he broke into a crooked, arrogant grin and strode to the small beverage table in the corner, where a few cups of coffee had been set out. Leonard picked up a cup, deliberately fixed Olivia with a mocking look, and called out with pointed emphasis, "Ms. Johnson, you must like your coffee really sweet with lots of cream, right? I hear that's what our service staff downstairs prefer." Each word rang out, drawn out to ensure everyone in the room caught the thinly veiled racist jab. A few directors near Leonard exchanged smirks, their eyes alight with approval at the CEO's crude joke. Olivia felt each syllable like a sharp blade cutting into her mind. She instantly recognized the intent behind the remark. It wasn't mere teasing, but a deep insult, designed to pigeonhole her with heavy stereotypes of race and class. His words reflected not only personal bias, but a deeply rooted toxic culture under his leadership. Yet Olivia remained unshaken. Refusing to give Leonard the reaction he sought, she inclined her head slightly and replied with measured poise, "Thank you, Mr. Harrison, but I take my coffee black, no sugar, much like I prefer to approach issues, clearly and directly." Her deft retort caught Leonard off guard, his face drained of color for a heartbeat before he forced back his self-satisfied grin and leaned over to murmur something to a colleague. Before Olivia could fully refocus, the door swung open again. A contingent of other senior Terra Nova executives entered, all clad in expensive suits and exuding overconfidence. The already tight quarters felt even more cramped. Leonard immediately turned his attention to them, greeting each with exaggerated warmth as he shook hands. When one newcomer extended his hand toward Olivia in courtesy, Leonard interjected in a cold, dismissive tone, repeating the same rebuff as before. "Oh no, Mr. Edwards. I don't shake hands with subordinates, and neither should you." His words reverberated through the room, laying bare his contempt for Olivia. Some of the new arrivals glanced at one another, feigning surprise, before pretending to focus on other matters. Others simply ignored the disrespect, tacitly condoning it. Olivia remained seated, her gaze unwavering and steely, a testament to her poise and restraint. Internally, she felt a profound disappointment, not in Leonard's behavior, which she had anticipated, but in Terra Nova itself. A powerhouse organization allowing someone like Leonard Harrison to wield unchecked authority. This was no longer a personal slight, but a vivid symbol of injustice and prejudice embedded in the company's culture. Amid that oppressive stillness, Olivia thought of the countless individuals who must have endured Leonard's public humiliations and discrimination, those who'd stayed silent for fear of losing advancement or even their jobs. Their silence had emboldened his arrogance and his brazen abuses of power. But today, Leonard had made a grievous error. He failed to recognize that Olivia Johnson was unlike anyone he'd ever encountered. She represented not only herself, but the force of a $4 billion investment he desperately needed, yet completely overlooked. Olivia reminded herself that true power does not stem from oppressing or belittling others. It comes from respect and fairness. Leonard had dug a deep pit for himself with his own bigotry and contempt. Straightening her posture, she fixed Leonard with an icy stare. Her silence spoke volumes. Though he had humiliated her publicly, the real battle was only beginning, and Olivia Johnson would be the one in control. The stifling tension continued to suffuse the cramped boardroom, each passing second stretched into an eternity. Olivia fixed Leonard with a cold, unwavering stare, not one of anger or bitterness, but of steely resolve, a quietly formidable power emanating from the woman he still dangerously underestimated. The moment Leonard publicly refused her handshake again, sneering, "I don't shake hands with subordinates," Olivia knew exactly what to do. Her decision was no longer a spur of the moment reaction or personal indignation. It had become a strategic choice, grounded in a wealth of irrefutable evidence of the toxic culture deeply embedded at Terra Nova Technologies. With discreet precision, Olivia slipped her hand into the small leather bag by her side, retrieved her phone, and switched it to silent. One word was all she needed to send: execute. That message to David Anderson, her long-time CFO and most trusted ally, was enough to trigger the plan Johnson Capital Partners had meticulously crafted long before today's meeting. Several blocks away, in an upscale office overlooking the Terra Nova headquarters, David sat before a large monitor filled with complex financial charts. When Olivia's brief message illuminated his phone screen, he allowed himself a faint, knowing smile. This was not delight, but deep understanding. He and Olivia had worked together long enough that he knew, the moment she chose the word execute, it signified no mere suggestion, but an absolute command. Without hesitation, David signaled to his team of financial analysts to spring into action. A flurry of carefully calibrated phone calls ensued, swift, precise, and utterly strategic. Those analysts began feeding subtle but potent signals to leading market watchers whose opinions directly influenced Terra Nova's share price. Less than 30 minutes after Olivia's instruction, on the world's major stock exchanges, a cascade of mysterious sell orders struck Terra Nova's shares at breakneck speed. Other investors, sensing something awry, quickly joined the exodus. What began as minor fluctuations rapidly escalated into a full-scale sell-off. Back in the small Terra Nova boardroom, Olivia showed not a trace of anxiety. She sat serenely, observing Leonard and his fellow directors. Leonard rambled on arrogantly, wholly oblivious to how instantly his company's financial fate had shifted. Suddenly, the ringing of Leonard's desk phone cut through the air. Insistent, frantic, and relentless. Jessica, his assistant, burst into the room, panic etched on her face. She bent to whisper urgently in his ear. Leonard's expression drained of color. He struggled to compose himself, but failed. He sprang from his chair and bolted from the room without explanation. Chaos erupted among the remaining executives. Some stood bewildered, exchanging confused glances. Olivia remained unmoved, calmly closing her portfolio and jotting a few concise notes in her notebook, as though she were merely observing an unconnected incident. Down the hall, in his private office, Leonard stared at the stock ticker on his screen in disbelief. Terra Nova's shares, his pride and joy, had plummeted catastrophically in under an hour, erasing hundreds of millions in market value almost instantly. "What the hell is happening?" Leonard snarled at the assistants clustered around him. Trembling, Jessica replied softly, "Sir, it appears someone has spread negative rumors and triggered a sell. Off. Wall Street analysts are also flagging concerns about our leadership and corporate culture." Leonard recoiled as if awakened from a long, cherished fantasy. His gaze shifted back toward the small boardroom where Olivia still sat composed, and a sharp unease settled in his chest. Meanwhile, Olivia allowed herself a discreet smile as her phone chimed again with David's brief update. Phase 1 complete. Stock is down 8% in 30 minutes. This was more than personal retribution. It was the most powerful warning Leonard and his kind could receive. Olivia understood that in the ruthless realm of finance, sometimes the clearest message must be delivered in the only language people like Leonard truly comprehend: money and markets. He might have dismissed her, mocked her publicly, but he failed to realize that the unassuming woman before him today was the very force controlling his company's financial destiny, wielding the power of a $4 billion investment. Calmly, Olivia gathered her documents and rose. There was nothing left to say. The decision was made, and Leonard Harrison would learn the hardest lesson of his career. Arrogance and contempt always come with a price far greater than he ever imagined. Leonard stood rooted to the spot in his private office, his eyes glued to the glowing red numbers on his computer screen. The screen's light danced across his ashen face as line after line of data updated, signaling that Terra Nova Technologies' stock was plummeting out of control. In that moment, all of Leonard's pride and habitual arrogance seemed to shatter. His phone's ringtone pierced the tense air, urgent, insistent, and cold, jerking Leonard from his trance. He whirled to look at Jessica, his desperation laced with fury. Jessica pressed forward, striving to remain calm, though her voice trembled with worry. "Mr. Harrison, we've just received urgent calls from several major shareholders. The stock has fallen 15% in under an hour, and it's still free, falling." Leonard snapped around, his tone clipped and tense. "What on earth is going on, Jessica? I need a clear explanation, right now." Jessica hesitated for a moment, eyes dropping to the folder in her hands. She drew a deep breath before speaking in a reluctant whisper that nonetheless rang loud in Leonard's mind. "It appears. It all traces back to this morning's meeting, sir. Olivia Johnson, the woman you met earlier, is actually the CEO of Johnson Capital Partners, the investment firm overseeing more than $50 billion in assets. She's the one who directly decided on the $4 billion investment into Terra Nova." Her voice grew so soft it barely qualified as a whisper, yet each word hammered home, obliterating Leonard's last illusions of control. He felt his breath catch in his throat, his cheeks burning with shame and fear. Gripping the edge of his desk for support, memories of how he'd treated Olivia flooded his mind. The public derision, the refusal to shake her hand, all now crystallized into ruthless pain. Leonard mumbled, dazed, "Olivia Johnson. Johnson Capital. My God, what have I done?" Jessica looked at him with pity and confusion. She'd never seen her powerful boss so vulnerable and panicked. At that moment, Leonard's office door flew open, and the senior leadership team hurried in, their faces grim and bewildered. Among them, CFO Eric Wilson wasted no time in demanding an answer. "Harrison, can you explain why our stock is in free fall? Shareholders are calling non-stop. This is a disaster." Leonard said nothing at first. He stood motionless, then slowly turned to face Eric and the others, his eyes blazing with a mix of rage and despair. "You're the ones responsible for this mess. Why didn't any of you warn me about Olivia Johnson's true status? How did you let me meet with someone so powerful without full disclosure?" Eric shot back sharply. "You can't pin that on us, Leonard. You're the one who underestimated people and let arrogance blind you. We warned you repeatedly about your culture of disrespect, but did you ever listen?" Another director, Michael, jumped into the fray. "We don't have time to assign blame. We need an emergency meeting right now to figure out how to contain this crisis." Leonard silently nodded, forced to admit that the situation had completely slipped beyond his control. A stark terror gripped him, his hard. One career and reputation teetered on the brink of collapse, all because of a few arrogant missteps. Minutes later, Terra Nova's entire senior leadership had gathered in the main boardroom. Chaos reigned. Voices rose over one another in accusations, but no one offered any viable solution. Leonard sat at the head of the table, despair etched on his face as he struggled to reclaim any shred of composure. Clearing his throat, he finally spoke. "Quiet, please. What we need now is to reach out to Olivia Johnson and Johnson Capital to explain the situation. It may not be too late to salvage this." Eric responded coldly. "You really think Ms. Johnson will listen after what you did this morning? This isn't just a financial blow. It's the collapse of our company's reputation and credibility. We stand to lose that $4 billion investment and trigger a mass exodus of other investors." Leonard swallowed hard, fury and desperation clashing within him. He could never have imagined himself here, betrayed by his own team, undone by the very arrogance and prejudice he'd always dismissed. As the boardroom erupted into heated debate, Leonard gazed out the window, his mind empty. The crisis he faced was more than financial. It was the inevitable consequence of the contempt he'd shown others, of his disregard for basic decency, and above all, his failure to recognize the unseen power of those he deemed unworthy. Now, Leonard Harrison had to confront a bitter truth. He had ignited the worst crisis in the company's history by his own hand, and the most frightening realization was that the woman he had so grossly underestimated, Olivia Johnson, was the one truly controlling his fate and that of Terra Nova Technologies. Leonard was still reeling in shock and powerlessness when the ping of incoming messages snapped him back to the harsh reality. He stared at his phone screen, where a flood of alerts showed Terra Nova Technologies' stock continuing its steep decline. Each notification felt like another dagger to his pride, which was already crumbling. At that moment, an audio recording suddenly surfaced on major news outlets and social media. No one else but Olivia Johnson herself had released irrefutable evidence of that morning's meeting. In the recording, Leonard's voice was unmistakable, laden with contempt and severe insults. The racially charged remarks he'd used to demean Olivia now echoed in millions of ears, leaving him no avenue for denial or excuse. Stunned, Leonard stared at his computer screen as the clip spread like wildfire. He realized there was nowhere left to hide. His words and actions, once cloaked by the veneer of his power, were now exposed in the glaring spotlight of public scrutiny. Panicked, he grabbed his phone and tried calling Olivia. He believed that a sincere apology, however belated, might still salvage something. But she didn't answer. After several attempts, he received a terse, icy reply from her, "Meet me at the office." Leonard bolted from Terra Nova's headquarters, speeding to the sleek office tower of Johnson Capital Partners. Unlike their first encounter, he entered the building now burdened by fear and uncertainty. Every glance he met brimmed with scorn and derision. Olivia was waiting in the spacious, glass-walled office, which overlooked the bustling street below. When Leonard stepped inside, she sat composed, arms folded, her cold gaze betraying both disappointment and anger. He approached her, bowed his head, and stammered out a contrived apology. "Miss Johnson, I truly apologize for what happened. My behavior was unacceptable, and I hope you'll give me a chance to make amends." Olivia said nothing at first, watching him intently. After a heavy silence, she spoke in a steely, authoritative tone. Mr. Harrison, you needn't waste time on empty apologies. I don't care about your insincere regret. What I want to see is real change. A healthy corporate culture where everyone is treated with respect. That is your true obligation. Leonard's face went pale, and he instinctively took a step back at the force of her conviction. Accustomed to wielding power over others, he now felt vulnerable and helpless in the face of his own mistakes. Olivia pressed on, her voice growing stern. I gave you a clear opportunity to demonstrate Terranova's real worth, but you chose disdain and bigotry. Now you must face the consequences of your own making. Leonard swallowed hard, searching for excuses but fell silent. Deep down, he knew she was right. His arrogance and discriminatory attitude had driven the company into its gravest crisis ever. As he left the Johnson Capital office, dozens of reporters surrounded him. Camera flashes stung his eyes as pointed questions rained down. Mr. Harrison, how do you respond to the newly released evidence of racism? Do you think Terranova can survive this scandal? Will you resign to take responsibility for what happened? Leonard scrambled through the crowd, seeking an escape that did not exist. News of the scandal spread like wildfire. The stock plunged further, triggering a mass exodus of investors. Back at Terranova's headquarters, Leonard was summoned to an emergency meeting with the largest shareholders. The once grand boardroom felt icy and foreboding. Shareholders regarded him with furious disappointment. No words were needed. He understood that their trust in him was utterly shattered. Richard Bennett, Terranova's venerable board chairman, rose and fixed Leonard with a steely gaze. Leonard, you have not only gravely damaged the company's reputation, but also jeopardized the futures of thousands of employees. The board demands that you immediately present a concrete, actionable plan to resolve this crisis, or be prepared to accept the consequences of your own making. Leonard bowed his head, unable to respond. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly small and powerless. Outside the window, the city pulsed on. Leonard realized that what he had lost was more than money or reputation. It was the respect of those who once believed in him. He had sown the wind, and now he must face the fiercest storm of his life, a storm born of the arrogance and prejudice he so recklessly dismissed. When Leonard left the boardroom, he felt with utter clarity that the nightmare he'd always feared was becoming reality. Just hours after Olivia Johnson had rebuffed his hollow apology, a cascade of revelations about the scandal inside Terranova Technologies went public, unleashing a tsunami of outrage that washed away every ounce of the fabricated prestige Leonard had so carefully constructed. At Johnson Capital Partners' offices, Olivia sat quietly before her computer screen, her expression calm yet resolute. With just a few keystrokes, she triggered the release of a meticulously prepared dossier, packed with evidence of racial discrimination, a toxic corporate culture, and abuses of power by Leonard and Terranova's senior executives. Those confidential files were sent directly to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the federal labor authorities, key corporate, ethics watchdogs, and the firm's largest institutional investors. The moment those documents went live, markets and media alike reeled. Major investors who had once placed unwavering trust in Terranova began to abandon ship. Emergency press conferences multiplied, and top financial analysts issued urgent advisories. Steer clear of Terranova stock at all costs. But the crisis didn't end there. Encouraged by Olivia's boldness, former Terranova employees, once silenced by intimidation, took to social media to share harrowing accounts of the toxic workplace they'd endured. They recounted instances of public humiliation at Leonard's hands, and experiences of having their ideas dismissed because of race, gender, or background. Each personal testimony struck like a sharpened blade, further shredding Terranova's already fragile reputation. The hashtag #ExposeTerranova exploded across Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, drawing millions of views and intensifying public scrutiny. Journalists and major media outlets dug into Leonard's past and Terranova's history, unearthing still more scandals long buried. Leonard felt as though the entire world had turned against him. Seated alone in his empty office, every vestige of the power and pride he once commanded had evaporated. His phone buzzed incessantly with incoming calls, but he lacked the courage to answer, aware that, on the other end, were only stern demands, accusations, and legal threats. Just when Leonard thought things couldn't get any worse, Richard Bennett, Terranova's venerable board chairman, appeared at his door, his face colder and more severe than ever. "Leonard," Bennett said, his voice steely and unyielding, "the board has convened an emergency session and decided to suspend you as CEO, effective immediately. We will launch an independent internal investigation to examine all allegations against you and the other senior executives." It felt like a knockout blow. Leonard tried to protest, but Bennett cut him off without mercy. "You have no voice here. You must understand that this is the consequence of your own actions. We cannot allow the company to be destroyed by one individual's recklessness and contempt." With that, Bennett turned and left, leaving Leonard frozen in despair. He realized that everything he had built now faced total collapse, and that he himself would soon have to answer to the authorities for these grave accusations. Meanwhile, Terranova's independent internal inquiry kicked into high gear. Board, appointed investigators, interviewed hundreds of employees and scoured thousands of emails, messages, and internal recordings. With each passing day, fresh evidence of the toxic culture Leonard had fostered for years came to light. Offensive, discriminatory emails, taped meetings in which Leonard blatantly dismissed ideas from women and people of color, all were laid bare under the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. Leonard recognized he had nowhere left to hide. Every one of his actions was now an open book. Olivia, from her Johnson Capital office, monitored every development. She didn't celebrate Leonard's downfall, but she understood it was necessary to pave the way for a fairer, healthier corporate culture. For Olivia, exposing these documents was not merely about punishing Leonard. More importantly, it was a clear message to the entire business world. No one has the right to demean another's worth or abuse power to oppress and discriminate. Real change sometimes demands facing fierce resistance from entrenched actors like Leonard Harrison. Now, Leonard confronted a harsh truth. He no longer controlled the game. All the power he had once wielded had evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of public, shareholder, and legal pressure. He was finally paying the price for the arrogance and prejudice he had long dismissed, and the woman he had so publicly insulted, Olivia Johnson, was the one holding the final say over his fate and the future of Terranova Technologies. When the door of Olivia's Johnson Capital Partners office closed behind Leonard and his attorney, a profound silence settled over the spacious room. Leonard had once entered here brimming with arrogance and confidence, but today he stood as a defeated man, his face gaunt, his eyes weary and desperate. Olivia sat across from him, her gaze cold and unwavering. Bathed in light from the floor to ceiling windows, she was more than just a powerful CEO. She embodied a revolution, an inevitable change Leonard could no longer avoid. "We're here hoping to reach a reasonable solution for both sides," Leonard's lawyer, Thomas Grayson, began carefully, his tone polite and measured. Olivia merely nodded with quiet courtesy, her composure still radiating authority. Leonard drew in a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain calm. Olivia, I know you're upset about what happened, but we can negotiate a better outcome than continuing this tension. Olivia tilted her head slightly, a faint, knowing smirk in her eyes. Mr. Harrison, this isn't about my personal satisfaction. What matters is whether you and Terra Nova have the courage for true root and branch change. Leonard frowned, struggling to rein in the unease stirring within him. No one had ever challenged his authority so directly. What exactly do you mean, Olivia? He asked, his voice betraying his tension. Slowly, Olivia opened a thick dossier on the table with deliberate force, then spoke each word with crystal clarity. If Terra Nova still wants that $4 billion investment from Johnson Capital, your company must undertake sweeping reforms, far beyond empty promises. Leonard swallowed, eyes narrowing as he stared at the dossier. Can you be more specific about those reforms? Without hesitation, Olivia laid out her demands, her voice resolute and uncompromising. First, you must fully disclose your internal compensation system. All salary and benefit information for employees must be publicly transparent, eliminating any disparities based on gender, race, or any other arbitrary factor. Leonard opened his mouth to protest, but Olivia pressed on before he could interrupt. Second, Terra Nova must commit to fair and diverse hiring policies, ensuring equal opportunity for everyone, regardless of background, race, or gender. These policies will be strictly overseen by an independent body appointed by us. Leonard's dissatisfaction was now evident. Miss Johnson, aren't you overstepping into our company's internal affairs? Olivia's reply was as steady as a rock. Mr. Harrison, this is no trivial investment. We must ensure it does not enable the wrongful conduct and toxic culture you have fostered. Third, and most crucially, Terra Nova must agree to regular, independent evaluations conducted by a third party we select. The results of those evaluations will be made public. Leonard sprang from his chair, anger boiling over. Olivia, are you really trying to strip me of control over the company I built? Olivia met his outburst with icy calm, her words precise as blades. I am not here to destroy you or Terra Nova. On the contrary, I'm offering a chance to salvage what remains after the havoc you've wreaked. But I will not tolerate empty promises. These changes must be concrete, irreversible, and without compromise. Leonard fell silent for several heartbeats, his breath catching in his chest. Sensing rising tension, Thomas Grayson leaned forward and gently advised Leonard to stay composed, then turned to Olivia. Miss Johnson, might we adjust some of these conditions? I believe Terra Nova may need more time to... Olivia cut him off instantly, her voice firm and unwavering. No, these conditions are non-negotiable. Terra Nova must accept them in full or forfeit the $4 billion investment forever. I doubt your board and shareholders would willingly walk away from that. Leonard stared at Olivia, a mix of fury and desperation in his eyes. He understood that these terms not only threatened his personal authority, but imperiled his entire leadership position. Yet he also knew he had no real alternative. The pressure from investors, the market, and public opinion was relentless. He had to decide, even in these dire circumstances. After a tense silence, Leonard exhaled in resignation and bowed his head. All right. Terra Nova will accept your conditions. We will implement these reforms as Johnson Capital requires. Olivia nodded, her expression unmoved, as cold and resolute as ever. I hope you understand one thing. This is only the first step. Whether these reforms succeed depends entirely on your genuine commitment. And remember, If you break your promise or try to deceive us again, the consequences will be far worse than anything you face today." Leonard rose slowly and left the office, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. He knew this negotiation marked a pivotal turning point, not only for the company's future, but for his own as well. Olivia watched him go in silence, fully aware that the real battle was far from over. But today she had achieved the most critical victory, forcing Leonard Harrison to confront the truth and accept that Terra Nova's toxic culture could not endure for another day. The moment Leonard stepped out of Olivia's office, weighed down by confusion and dread, Terra Nova Technologies' board of directors convened an emergency meeting to make a decision that could no longer be postponed. Never had the cavernous boardroom felt so heavy. The directors' eyes were tense, unsettled, but determined. Under intense pressure from public opinion, the market, and major shareholders, they knew they had no choice but to embrace the sweeping changes Olivia had demanded. Chairman Richard Bennett rose, his face grave, and announced the inevitable. "We cannot deny that the company is in its gravest crisis to date. The board has unanimously decided that Leonard Harrison will be removed from his position as CEO, effective immediately." A charged silence fell over the room. Though members had anticipated this, Richard's formal declaration still drove home the weight of what was about to happen. Leonard sat quietly, his face ashen, struggling to hide his deep disappointment and anger. At the same time, Richard continued, turning to the company's chief financial officer, "We are appointing Patricia Winters, our CFO, as acting CEO to guide Terra Nova through this crisis." Patricia Winters, a composed, middle-aged woman with neatly pinned light brown hair, stood calmly. Known for her intelligence, decisiveness, and fairness, she understood that this was her opportunity to root out the toxic culture that had driven Terra Nova to the brink. From her first day in her new role, Patricia summoned all senior leadership to an urgent meeting. Some of the more conservative directors exchanged uneasy looks, but Patricia spoke with clarity and resolve. "We must implement the extensive reforms required by Johnson Capital Partners. I will accept no reasons for delay or dissent. Anyone who feels unable to meet our new standards of transparency and diversity may depart now." Murmurs of discontent rose through the room. Michael Edwards, a long-standing director under Leonard, stood to object sharply. "Ms. Winters, do you realize you're undermining the leadership foundation of this company? Reforms are necessary, but are these drastic measures the right solution?" Patricia met his challenge without hesitation, her gaze unwavering. "Precisely that so-called leadership foundation is what has driven us over the edge. Unless we discard those flawed values, this company cannot survive." Patricia then launched a series of decisive reforms. She ordered full disclosure of every employee's compensation, dismantling the inequalities that had festered for years. Simultaneously, she terminated several entrenched conservative directors known for their discriminatory attitudes, individuals who had held influential positions for far too long. Each dismissal sparked intense debate both inside and outside the company. Some argued Patricia was moving too hastily, adding chaos to an already turbulent period. But she remained unshaken, knowing these bold steps were essential to restore trust among employees and investors. Over the following days, Patricia personally oversaw the creation of an independent diversity and equity oversight committee, rolling out objective, transparent hiring standards. A third-party organization nominated by Johnson Capital Partners was swiftly established to conduct rigorous, periodic assessments of Terra Nova's work environment and corporate culture. At first, many employees and mid-level managers doubted the effectiveness of these changes. Yet within weeks, they began to see Patricia's genuine commitment. Gradually, faith was rebuilt, and hope kindled among those who had long endured bias and pressure. In the financial markets, Terra Nova's stock initially swung wildly in response to Patricia's sweeping actions, but investors soon recognized the company's genuine pivot toward positive change. Financial analysts shifted from issuing sell-off warnings to advising a close watch on Terra Nova's restructuring progress. From her Johnson Capital Partners office, Olivia Johnson monitored every development with cautious satisfaction. She understood the challenges Patricia faced, and it reinforced her confidence that the $4 billion investment she was considering could indeed catalyze a profound turnaround. Meanwhile, Leonard sat in his luxurious yet lonely apartment, following the news of Terra Nova's transformation. He bitterly realized the company was beginning to revive without him, under Patricia's decisive leadership. Each new policy and reform served as a painful reminder. His downfall was not the result of a single careless decision, but the inevitable outcome of a toxic culture he had built and maintained for years. Patricia Winters knew the road ahead still held many challenges, but she believed deeply in the power of transparency and equity. She was determined to spark a true cultural revolution, one that would leave an indelible mark on Terra Nova's history. The moment the door of Olivia's Johnson Capital Partners office closed behind Leonard and his attorney, a profound silence fell over the expansive room. Leonard had once entered here brimming with arrogance and confidence, but today he looked like a defeated man. Haggard, exhausted, and desperate. Olivia sat across from him, her gaze cold and unwavering. In the bright light streaming through the floor, 2 ceiling windows, she was more than a powerful CEO. She embodied a revolution, a change Leonard could no longer evade. "We're here hoping to reach a reasonable solution for both parties," Leonard's lawyer, Thomas Grayson, began, his voice careful and polite. Olivia simply nodded, maintaining her calm, authoritative demeanor. Leonard drew a deep breath and forced his voice to remain steady. "Olivia, I know you're unhappy with what happened, but surely we can work out something better than this standoff." Olivia tilted her head slightly, a hint of wry amusement in her eyes. "Mr. Harrison, this isn't about my personal satisfaction. What concerns me is whether you and Terra Nova have the courage for fundamental root and branch change." Leonard frowned, struggling to hide the discomfort rising within him. No one had ever challenged his authority so directly. "What exactly do you mean, Olivia?" he asked, tension edging his voice. Slowly, Olivia opened a thick dossier on the table with deliberate force, and spoke each word with steely clarity. "If Terra Nova still wants that $4 billion investment from Johnson Capital, your company must undertake sweeping reforms, far beyond empty promises." Leonard swallowed and looked down at the dossier, skeptical. "Can you specify what reforms you have in mind?" Without hesitation, Olivia laid out her demands in firm, uncompromising tones. "First, you must fully disclose your entire compensation system. All salary and benefit information for every employee must be publicly transparent to eliminate any disparities based on gender, race, or any other arbitrary factor." Leonard began to protest, but Olivia cut him off immediately. "Second, Terra Nova must commit to fair and diverse hiring policies, ensuring equal opportunity for all, regardless of background, race, or gender. These policies will be rigorously overseen by an independent body appointed by us." Leonard's impatience became evident. "Miss Johnson, aren't you overstepping into our company's internal affairs?" Olivia replied evenly, without a flicker of doubt. "Mr. Harrison, this $4 billion investment is no game. We need to ensure it doesn't prop up the misconduct and toxic culture you fostered. Third, and most critically, Terra Nova, must agree to regular, independent audits by a third party we select. The results of those audits will be published publicly. Leonard leapt to his feet, fury in his voice. Olivia, are you really trying to strip me of control over the company I built? Olivia remained seated, her tone razor sharp. I have no desire to destroy you or Terra Nova. I'm trying to help you salvage what's left after the havoc you've caused. But I will not accept empty pledges. These reforms must be concrete, specific, and irreversible. Leonard fell silent for a few heartbeats, a catch in his throat. Sensing the tension, Thomas Grayson quietly urged him to stay calm, then addressed Olivia. Miss Johnson, might we adjust some of these conditions? Terra Nova may need more time to... Olivia cut him off instantly, her voice unwavering. No. These conditions are non-negotiable. Terra Nova must accept them in full, or lose the $4 billion investment forever. I doubt your board and shareholders would willingly walk away from that. Leonard stared at her, a mixture of anger and desperation in his eyes. He knew these demands threatened not only his personal authority, but also his future leadership. Yet he also realized he had no other option. Pressure from investors, the market, and public opinion left him no choice but to decide, even under the worst circumstances. After a tense pause, Leonard exhaled in resignation and bowed his head. All right, Terra Nova will accept your conditions. We will implement these reforms as Johnson Capital requires. Olivia nodded, her expression unchanged, still cold and resolute. I hope you understand this is only the first step. Whether these reforms succeed depends on your genuine commitment. And remember, if you break your promise or try to deceive us again, the consequences will be far more severe than anything you face today. Leonard rose slowly and left the office, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. He understood that this negotiation marked a pivotal turning point, not only for the company's future but for his own. Olivia watched him depart in silence, fully aware that the real battle was far from over. But today she had achieved the most critical victory, forcing Leonard Harrison to confront the truth and accept that the toxic culture he had created could not survive another day. In the wake of that landmark trial, the atmosphere at Terra Nova Technologies underwent a complete transformation. The months of tension, conflict, and uncertainty gave way to a new spirit of hope, confidence, and positive energy under Patricia Winter's decisive leadership. Patricia recognized that her mission extended far beyond mere crisis management. She was tasked with rebuilding the company's culture from the ground up, ensuring that the grievous mistakes of the past could never be repeated. With unwavering determination, she championed sweeping reforms, from a fair, transparent hiring system to robust diversity and inclusion policies. Where Terra Nova's culture had once been known for its authoritarianism and bias, it became open and transparent. Every week, Patricia held town hall meetings to solicit employee feedback, cultivating a workplace where everyone felt heard and respected. Those who had once remained silent out of fear now felt empowered to share ideas and innovations without dread of punishment or contempt. Patricia also partnered closely with independent organizations to conduct regular cultural audits. The reports from these audits were published publicly, earning renewed trust from investors in the market. Under this rigorous oversight, Terra Nova's reputation gradually recovered, and it emerged as a new emblem of positive change in an industry long criticized for conservatism and unfair practices. Against this backdrop of revitalization, Olivia Johnson, who had been closely monitoring every development, arranged a formal meeting with Patricia to discuss the future of Johnson Capital Partners' contemplated $4 billion investment. They met at Terra Nova's headquarters, in a bright, welcoming conference room that reflected the company's renewed ethos. When Olivia entered, she immediately sensed the difference. The coldness and prejudice she'd once encountered were gone, replaced by friendly smiles and warm greetings, tangible proof of Patricia's hard work. Patricia rose to welcome her, offering a genuine, warm smile. "Welcome back, Miss Johnson. I hope you can see the remarkable changes we've made at Terra Nova." Olivia returned the smile, her eyes reflecting genuine satisfaction. "I've been watching your reforms closely, Patricia. Honestly, you've exceeded my highest expectations." Their conversation was candid and open. Patricia detailed the reform's successes, impressive statistics on the increased representation of women and people of color in senior roles, full transparency in compensation, and programs that made employees feel valued and heard. After listening attentively, Olivia nodded and delivered the announcement everyone had been awaiting. "Patricia, I am pleased to confirm that Johnson Capital Partners will proceed with the full $4 billion investment in Terra Nova. I believe this is not only a sound business decision, but also a strong vote of confidence in the new corporate culture you and your team are building." News of the $4 billion investment spread quickly, sparking an immediate positive reaction in the market. Terra Nova's stock climbed steadily as investor confidence was restored. Financial analysts began to cite Terra Nova as a model for corporate governance, transparency, and inclusive culture. Under Patricia's leadership, Terra Nova didn't just recover. It became an industry pioneer. Other major tech firms followed suit, restructuring their own internal systems, removing entrenched negativism, adopting fair hiring practices, and commissioning independent cultural audits. Once mired in scandal and crisis, Terra Nova experienced a remarkable rebirth thanks to Patricia's bold vision and Olivia Johnson's strategic backing. Former skeptics within the company now took pride in being part of this powerful transformation. And Leonard Harrison, the man who once wielded supreme authority at Terra Nova, could only observe these triumphs from afar, consumed by deep regret. He realized that the power he had coveted was ultimately illusory. True power lay in the respect, fairness, and transparency that Patricia and Olivia had tirelessly championed. Terra Nova's revival marked more than a business success. It was a historic turning point in how companies perceived the essential role of diversity and equity. Through her decisive investment, Olivia Johnson sent a resounding message. Equality, respect, and inclusion are not mere ideals, but vital prerequisites for any organization's enduring success in today's world. The spectacular success of Terra Nova's deep-seated reforms quickly rippled through the tech industry and financial world, proving the real power of a transparent, diverse corporate culture. Olivia Johnson recognized that Terra Nova's dramatic turnaround wasn't just a one-company story. It was a rare opportunity to spark positive, lasting change across the entire investment landscape. Determined to seize this moment, Olivia took center stage at a major New York event attended by the world's top financial leaders. Confident and compelling, she unveiled Johnson Capital Partners' new investment criteria. From now on, any company seeking their funding must meet rigorous standards of equality, diversity, and transparency in governance and culture. The room fell silent as Olivia declared, "Going forward, Johnson Capital will evaluate companies not only on profits and growth potential, but also on leadership ethics, corporate culture, and genuine commitment to diversity and inclusion. This isn't just the right thing to do. It's the only way to secure sustainable value for investors and society alike." Her bold statement shook the global finance community. Companies that wanted Johnson Capital's backing scrambled to overhaul their governance, revamp hiring policies, and reshape corporate culture. Within weeks, Dozens of major firms voluntarily adopted the standards Olivia had announced, setting off an unprecedented wave of reform. Across financial forums and social media, debates raged over corporate responsibility and the role of major investors. Seeing the mounting pressure, other leading investment houses began instituting similar criteria, retooling their partner selection and portfolio management to align with these new norms. But Olivia knew that changing corporate behavior required more than just standards and speeches. She aimed to drive real, internal change by empowering a new generation of leaders from historically overlooked communities. With that goal, Johnson Capital launched a special investment and training program for emerging leaders from underrepresented groups, people of color, women, and immigrants. The initiative provided not only capital, but also intensive leadership and governance training, equipping them with the confidence and skills to transform their own companies and communities. These rising leaders soon made their mark, delivering strong business results while exemplifying diversity and fairness in the boardroom. Olivia stood beside them as a hands-on mentor, offering practical advice and a sympathetic ear whenever they faced challenges. In a Forbes interview, Olivia stated firmly, "True investment power isn't about short-term gains, it's about shaping society and opening real opportunities for everyone. Responsible investing isn't a passing trend. It's a long-term commitment that every major investor must embrace." From afar, Leonard Harrison, the once all-powerful CEO who lost everything to his arrogance and prejudice, watched Olivia's rise with growing awe. He realized she had achieved what he never dared to imagine, transforming the business world through economic influence and genuine social responsibility. Meanwhile, under Olivia's ongoing support, Patricia Winters and Terra Nova flourished. The company became a new standard for success rooted in ethical values and social responsibility. Terra Nova's full recovery and its inspiring example encouraged other firms to believe that financial performance and social good could truly go hand in hand. Years later, standing on a stage to accept a prestigious award for excellence in socially responsible investing, Olivia addressed thousands with passion and pride. "We each choose the legacy we leave behind. I choose one of equality, diversity, and transparency. I choose to invest in people, in the young leaders changing society every day by giving them real power, voice, and opportunity." The audience erupted in applause, but Olivia knew her journey wasn't over. She vowed to continue standing with the next generation of leaders, supporting them with all her financial resources and experience, because only when economic power is used wisely can the world truly change. Olivia Johnson's story and the revolution at Terra Nova became a classic lesson for investors and businesses everywhere. It demonstrated not just the transformative power of one individual, but also that integrity, transparency, and diversity aren't mere ideals. They are the strongest foundation for lasting success. And that is the legacy Olivia Johnson is proud to leave. A legacy far beyond the numbers. A clear message that true power is not in oppressing others but in creating positive, enduring change for all. What about you? Do you believe every company should adopt equal opportunity and transparency standards like Johnson Capital? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved and inspired you, please like, share the video, and subscribe to help us spread these positive values and make the world a better place. Thank you for joining us, and see you in our next inspiring story.